Hi, I'm Beck and I'm a property investor.
And I'm Daria. I own my own home and I'm curious about investing.
We're the hosts of Investors in the Wild.
We've heard it all before. Build your wealth, get expert advice, learn about high yield, high growth investments, blah, blah, blah.
That's just not us. We're real mates with real talk about real estate. No ego, no financial advice.
It's all about wins you can use right now.
Let's get into it.
G'day, it's Beck, and welcome back to Investors in the Wild. A few weeks back we had Anna on talking about her very first Bondi unit purchase, plus purchasing another house and apartment to then eventually buy her dream house. Today we're diving into her experiences with apartments. You'll hear about her income stream, selling apartments, scarcity, mould, the losses, and the lessons. You're going to get some real talk. This episode is fascinating. Let's get into it.
So Anna, what are some of the most impactful learnings that you've had?
Every decision we've made for a reason. And so when we started investing, the strategy was around what could we afford and what would give us the right rental yield. So not necessarily thinking about capital gains for good or for bad. So capital gains, it really worked out well for us in the home that we ended up living in. But that wasn't our strategy, whether that was right or wrong. Our strategy was buy something that gives you a good rental return to help you pay off that mortgage. And so we've always been relatively positively geared, topping it up here and there for like strata and things. And then with the view that that is our retirement plan. At whatever point we start working less, we have this second stream of income. And then, yes, you'll pay tax on that income, but as then your primary income goes down and that goes up, it sort of balances out.
Hey, jumping in real quick with a gold nugget, let's talk about Anna and her husband's type. When they think about their retirement, their aim is to buy apartments, pay them down over time, and then eventually live off the rent as and when they retire.
And that was, again, really based on the experience of my husband's family, who had invested in lots of property and been quite fortunate that they're able to hold on to those for the indefinite future. And so that becomes an income stream for the family. We were really thinking about it in that way, not necessarily for capital gains, which then meant that when we did need to sell a unit, so the only unit that we have sold or that I have sold was the Castlereagh one. That unit was interesting because it is a dual key. So it is one title, one property that you buy and one mortgage, but it's actually two units beyond the key. So you have one door and then you have two units. And so one was a studio apartment and the other one was a one-bedroom apartment. So they were rented, insured, everything individually, but the purchase was one. So it was like a two for one. When we bought that property, we bought it using some of our equity from my Bondi unit, and we bought it for that rental return, and it always performed really, really well. But what we found is when it was time to upgrade our home, our equity was tied up in that property. And so in order to free it up to allow us to borrow what we needed, the smartest move was to get rid of that one. It had the biggest loan, even though the rent was really great. And so it just freed us up and allowed us to keep the other properties. And so we actually did sell it at a bit of a loss. Not significant, but if I think about the gains that we made on our home, selling a unit at a loss was still a painful realization. But I think we were just, when we ran the numbers and the way that we looked at it was, firstly, I think if we didn't want to upgrade our home, we wouldn't have sold it. I'd still have it today because it was paying for itself. The only drawback was our ability to borrow. And then when we were deciding when would be the right time to sell it, being in the CBD, pretty much we bought it at a very hot part of the market. So it was at its peak. It probably increased a little bit, but then you had COVID. All of a sudden, kind of that CBD demand went back. All of the rents went down across the CBD. And then something that we didn't necessarily consider, because we were thinking about rental yield, was that from a capital gains perspective is there's a lot of supply in the city, right? And so if you're an investor, if you're looking to purchase, there's a lot that you can choose from. It doesn't have that scarcity that some of the other suburbs would have. And so great if you're like us, we're thinking about the long term, but if you're thinking about turning it out short term, it's just not going to grow at the same pace as other markets because there is so much supply in the city.
Just jumping in real quick with another gold nugget, Anna makes some really interesting points around supply and demand. Buying an inner city apartment, as Anna alludes to, post-COVID, there were fewer tenants, there was reduced demand, that means a lower yield, and also a higher supply of apartments. Many investors, when they talk about buying apartments, particularly if they're looking for capital gains, target apartments where there's scarcity. I've done this with a few apartments. In particular, I bought an apartment in Rose Bay, and I spoke about this apartment a few episodes ago. It was lucrative to buy this apartment in an area where there's more demand. I had the apartment for 3 years. The value went up by 25% in those 3 years. And that's because it was by the water, it's a boutique block, and there really isn't a huge supply of apartments that are good quality and meet that criteria too. Contrast that with Anna's purchase, where she bought in the city where there's significant supply, better yield, but the resale value isn't there. Now, Anna's strategy makes perfect sense yield-wise. The yield for my apartment wasn't great. The yield for Anna's apartment was a lot stronger. So the gold nugget here is really, it helps when you're purchasing a place to know the intention. What is your plan for this property? What purpose does it play? Is it to gain in value so that you can use that money to purchase something else, which is what I used? Or is it to bring in really good income in retirement, which is why Anna bought hers? Being clear on the intention will help you to buy the most suitable place.
And so with everything, we just found that market stagnated and moved back a little. But for us, when we ran the numbers, we could hold on to it for like another 5-10 years, hoping that it will go up, and it will eventually go up. But what will those 5 or 10 years of waiting do for us as a family? And so for us, the ability to move today and make a move today when we were in the position and we're earning well and all of that was more important. And we were like, you know what, let's just cut that loss. We can offset some of that with some other gains and etc. And it will allow us to make the moves that are right for us as a family today. And when we're ready to step back into investing, then we will.
Beautiful.
I just want to go through scarcity with apartments, and I think that makes a huge difference. And I would love to know, from your experience buying houses and apartments, especially the losses for that inner city apartment,
Yeah.
does it change your perception about buying apartments as an investment? Because you look at your house, and I think the value more than doubled in the time that you owned it, and you could add a lot of value. The apartment, on the other hand, the value decreased. So does it make you think differently?
Yeah. It definitely does. It definitely does. I'm not sure it would necessarily change, because I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the numbers and what you have to spend and what you're getting back. And so I think if you can buy a house in an area that you feel confident, that is desirable, and that is going to continue to grow, and a lot of houses do, and generally they grow faster than units, but because it was around building a portfolio that would give us income, and houses are just not ever going to give you the same income as a unit in terms of a ratio for the loan. And so houses are more expensive to buy, so we will have to outlay more in terms of deposit, in terms of equity, in terms of the repayments, and then you're getting a much lower rent, right? And so getting that lower rent means that you're probably having to top up that mortgage out of your own funds, which if you have the funds to do, fabulous, right? But then again, the only time you will realize capital gains is when you sell. Then if you're going to buy a house for capital gain, you have to be aware that you're planning to sell it. And so when you sell it, you're going to be paying capital gains tax. You're paying stamp duty when you buy, paying capital gains tax when you sell. But because we're thinking about our long term and our retirement, I think units are still really valuable because you're able to get them more affordably. They do have a really great rental yield. And in time, if you're able to bring those loans down slowly over time because they're paying themselves off and you're bringing them, that will be an income that you will have. And they are still a valuable. It's not that, and look, our CBD apartment, it was interesting. It stagnated. We probably did lose money, but because it was over such a long period of time, I didn't necessarily feel it in that same way.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
You keep saying like paying down the investments. Does that mean you're not doing interest only and you're paying P&I? And it sounds like you're actually paying a little bit more on your loans, and it's a deliberate strategy.
Yeah, originally we weren't. So I think when we were building our portfolio, definitely it was just interest, right? Interest only. But what we kind of ended up in the P&I space almost by default with our loans because we'd been on interest only for so long. We had to move to P&I. And then what we just found is we might as well, I only add a little bit extra. So like whatever the amount is, I round it up. But the strategy has shifted. When we were looking to upgrade our family home, I wanted to spend as little money on my investments as possible, right? And so I had them on interest only. I wanted to maximize from a tax perspective that, and every spare dollar I had, I needed it for myself. Now that we have what we hope is our forever home and we feel really comfortable, at least for the immediate future, if we have a little bit extra, we are putting it on our family home because I want to bring that loan down. So for me, it's like you should try to pay as little on what you can't claim in tax. And at least with investment properties, if you're paying interest only, there's like that tax benefit there. But what we have found now is as we get comfortable, if we do have a little bit extra, I have been putting it there because I do see these as long-term investments. So what I would like to in the long term is have those loans down really small so that I'm making more income off them so that it's really for me around, yes, I will be paying more tax, but if I'm paying tax, I'm making money, right? So I feel like that becomes an income that as we get a little bit older, if we want to pull back on work or we start thinking about retirement, it is a stream. And so I think that is just something, and maybe it's a legacy of having parents that moved here from overseas, the struggle that they've been through, like just thinking about how you're setting yourself up, how do you have this income for the future.
Me again. I wanted to jump in with this gold nugget. It's an unusual one, particularly for investors. A lot of investors talk about paying interest only on their loans, i.e., they in some instances rarely pay down the loan. Anna's strategy I thought was quite interesting though. Her and her husband pay down the loans gradually as they get older so that they can ease off work and not have to trigger a sale event at one point to pay off the loans, but rather those loans are paid down over time. There are pros and cons of the interest only versus principal and interest and paying the loans down. It's definitely something that you should research yourself and figure out what works best for you.
How do you de-risk apartments? I feel like Daria and I talk about apartments a lot, and there are just so many horror stories around apartments, but you seem really intent on them.
Yeah, it is a risk. So my Bondi unit, it has been a good investment. Whilst it hasn't doubled, tripled in the way that the house value did, it has increased. I've still definitely made money. It's always rented well, it's always paid for itself. But it is an old building in Bondi, and old buildings in Bondi or have mould or have moisture issues. The building itself needs remedial work. So I can't say it has been like a seamless experience because that building, it is an old building that needs a lot of work. And for that reason, I'm a big believer in insurance. Landlord have all the insurances because you just need to be covered for all of that. And that has, always protected me when things have not necessarily gone to plan. Like when I had my mold issue with Bondi and I didn't have tenants for 6 months, that was hard. I was grateful for my mortgage insurance. I was grateful for all of these things, but it was hard to live through and it was scary, right? So it's definitely not perfect. And even COVID, all of our rents went down 50% across all of our units, ones that I own with Simon, the ones that he owns on his own, etc. And so all of a sudden we needed to be able to carry those loans that were paying for themselves. We need to carry most of them. And so I think that's when I was grateful for our cautiousness of pushing ourselves, but never pushing ourselves to the point that we couldn't, because we had to cut back, but we could afford it and we could keep them and we could ride that wave.
Hey, it's Beck. Just wanted to say, if you've been getting something out of what we're chatting about, we'd love your help spreading the word. Hit follow if you haven't already. Share an episode with a mate who's thinking about investing, or leave us a review on Spotify. Even sliding into our DMs on Instagram at Investors in the Wild to tell us what you're vibing with helps us load. So if you're keen to help every poppy grow tall, join our community, send us a DM and share us with a friend. All right, back to it.
Yeah, I think maybe my bias to apartments is very much less so necessarily my experience, but my husband's and his family's experience of having them. And because they are more attainable, more affordable, you're able to pay them off, you're able to afford them in the first place and then pay them off sooner. And they're an important part of the property landscape. People need apartments, people need them to live in. They rent really well. So as investments, there's often quite a high demand for units, whereas homes, like, not that there isn't a high demand for homes, but I think when you're buying a home, you're competing both with investors and you're also competing a lot with people that want to live there. And then there's a lot of emotion there. Whereas I think just in terms of being able to purchase, when you're looking at units, often competing, yes, with some homeowners, but a lot of investors. And so people are looking at it a lot more rationally. So you are able to be a lot more rational in your decision making. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this giving you some level of comfort, Daria? Because I feel like so many of the other conversations have been like, stay away from apartments, avoid apartments. But this is like, no, it actually does make
Well,
sense in many scenarios.
absolutely. I think this conversation with Anna's cleared up the murky waters in the sense that she's really got a strong strategy behind the different approaches, right? And so what I'm understanding is that if you are in it for the long run, if you want to play the long game, it is in your best interests to get an apartment because, one, it's affordable, so you pay less deposit and you've just got less costs associated with putting down the initial funding and getting the loan. Two, you can make, depending on where you pick the apartment, a really good rental income from it. The problem is if you need to sell it for any reason, including for your forever home, that you might make a loss depending on what the situation is, because the price increase won't be as substantial as a house in a good area, for example.
Yeah. And look, I have plenty of friends who have bought units as their first property, and most of them have made money. So I think my experience is really thinking about where you're buying and that whole supply demand. I think because we bought in the CBD thinking purely investment and that we wouldn't necessarily ever want to sell it, then when we did need to sell it, it was a problem.
So that's a learning. That's a big learning.
Definitely.
So,
Whereas I think if you think about what is happening in this area, okay, so you live in the Northern Beaches. I want to live on the Northern Beaches. I think a unit in the Northern Beaches, similar to my house strategy, is like you're at least buying in that area. So you know the area, it's somewhere where you would want to live. My next investment property will probably a unit in where I live now. So it will be in the inner west, it will be close to the Canada Bay, Abbotsford area, and it will be a unit because I will be seeing that as I probably can afford it more than another house. I cannot afford another house in this area. It will give me a decent rental income, but it's an area I want to live in. And like this is, now that I have children, I think very differently. Whereas I didn't live here before. When we started investing, it was around what areas were appealing. Bondi, always in demand, and it is. So I've never had a problem renting out the Bondi unit. It's always demand. In the city, it was always high interest in renting those units. But as soon as COVID hit and people were like, oh, I can work more remotely, that changed the dynamic. International students weren't coming in, that changed the dynamic. So actually a lot has happened to the CBD in the time that we've owned it that we couldn't have predicted. And I think good areas that people want to live in, they always want to live in, right? And so whether you want to live there or other people, I think having that sense of where actually people want to be, regardless of what might happen externally. We just couldn't have predicted this, right? Yeah. So it's just, that was probably my learning there. I would buy in Bondi again, but I probably wouldn't buy in the CBD.
Just quickly want to touch on another gold nugget from Anna. She buys in areas where there's strong appeal and where she and other people want to be. That's different to what some other investors have mentioned. Some investors look more for emerging or future appeal, but again, that's why it's important to research and be really clear on what your intent is for the property.
The point you made around scarcity, I think that's the difference between gains with apartments. When you're buying in an area where there's scarcity, like Bondi, there aren't limitless apartments in Bondi, but there is limitless supply in the city.
Anna, are there any key takeaways that you want people to leave with?
I've always grappled with, would it have been smarter to go for capital gains versus rental yield? That's something I don't know the answer to, but I guess the reality is I couldn't have done it any other way. I just couldn't have afforded it, frankly. So whether it would have been smarter to do something, and I am grateful that I made the move, that very first apartment being pushed, because I think once you do buy something, it does take a lot of the stigma and the fear out of it, just knowing that you can, and then your appetite to then continue investing and learning. I'm very grateful that I had that push. So having someone that encouraged me to not be as afraid as I was, I think for me was invaluable. And then also when you start buying, you do start to build momentum. So when we were buying property, like we were looking and buying, we were in that space, and that was a point in time. And this isn't for everyone, but if I could go back and tell myself anything, it's to be less afraid before I had kids, because my priorities have so significantly changed now that I've had them, that I overthink everything and I'm always thinking about their future, as I should. And I think I could have been even more fearless before then. And so I think backing yourself and just knowing that, but I don't know, if I'd done that, maybe I would be in a different position today. So I'm loath to change anything, because if I change anything, something might be different. And I'm actually really blessed, even though it wasn't perfect, even though I lost money here and I did this there, everything has turned out the way it needed to turn out in my life, that I'll take those losses if it means I end up here. But I know that's easy to say now.
Not even exaggerating in any way, Anna. I have found this conversation fascinating and challenging, like positively challenging things that I've thought for so long. I've written a list of like, Beck, you need to think more about this. Beck, you need to think more about this. Beck, you need to think more about this. I want to go through that list of things, and I would love to hear if there is one of those that you feel the most passionate about.
Hey, quick one. These gold nuggets are from our entire conversation with Anna. They touch on the gold nuggets from her first episode a few weeks ago and this episode today. If you haven't yet listened to Anna's first episode, have a listen after this. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
The first one is you and your husband very clearly research, and you are not in a rush, you're taking your time. Second, you lean on your network, your partner, your friends, you ask for other people's opinions. Number 3, you're comfortable getting places that other people walk out of. Number 4, you add value, but there's this continuous conversation about risk and not overextending yourselves. That was really interesting. Next one, you buy where you want to live. Next one, there's just such a theme about intention here. What's affordable? What's the yield? What's best for the family? And then finally, this recent learning around buying where there's scarcity. I feel like they were just really powerful lessons that came through. Is there one that you feel most passionate about that you're like,
I think it's the one around taking our time, but then also really balancing. I'm a bit of an overthinker and balancing that risk. And I think taking the time, doing the research, not feeling pressured. Sometimes there is pressure and you feel like there are deadlines. I've always felt like putting in the research and feeling really informed. And so it's really funny because my husband, he's a little bit more emotional. He's a little bit more impulsive, but then he has that remorse. Like he'll make a quick decision, but then he has a lot of buyer's remorse. I'm the complete opposite. I will take a lot of time to think about something and weigh it up. I will overthink it to death. So when I make that decision, I am like, I'm all in. And I will not question myself, even if maybe some things weren't the perfect decision. It was the right decision at the time. And I will just hold myself to that and not beat myself up about that. And so I think that's where we balance ourselves really well between us. Unless we were both happy and comfortable, we wouldn't make a move. And therefore, all of that research and everything we did, sometimes to our family that maybe we hadn't told that we were looking at property, it would feel like we made it really impulsive. You saw a place this morning, you made an offer today, and you're buying it and you're selling your house all of a sudden and blah, blah, blah. It felt very impulsive. But to us, that was like years of dipping in, dipping out, asking questions, months of all of that, so that we could be impulsive, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
We're so well researched that we knew when it was time to move. I couldn't operate any other way because I wouldn't feel comfortable.
I love that, because sometimes I feel like a lot of urgency. I need to move. I'm ready. I've got to go. I've got to go. And so this is a really good reminder of just like you're in research mode and this step can't be skipped. It'd be like marrying the first person you meet. You'd be like, warning, warning, warning.
And just to close off on that, Beck, at the same time, we've been in research mode. In the end, when we bought this home, our more latest home, we were just thinking, you know what, we think we're going to sell our unit to position ourselves maybe in the future be ready to buy. So we started looking, and then we got excited, and then that momentum kicked. So we actually thought that we would be selling our unit, selling our house, buying another house within the period of a couple of years. That all happened within 3-4 months. We sold Castlereagh in June. We bought this property. We put an offer in July, August, and we sold our house in September. So everything moves slowly until it suddenly moves. So, yeah.
Mhm.
But I think we felt good about it because we'd done all of the thinking for such a long time.
This has been
Thank you.
such a wonderful episode. Thank you so much, Anna, for joining. I genuinely gained a lot of insight, and Beck, you extracted those gold nuggets like no other. So that was amazing. Thank you so much for your generosity with your time, especially knowing you've just come back from a holiday. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm
Yeah,
amazed my
thank-
kids didn't interrupt. So that's
Well,
win.
I thought do you know how many times I told my dad I'm going to be doing this, and yet he still came in and spoke loudly, and then the dog started barking, and so I hope that none of it's on the record. But anyway,
I didn't hear a single thing. Honestly, Anna, that was fascinating. I am going to be thinking about this for days. You know, when you kind of hear something and you're like, I need to hear this a few times for it to really sink in. This was fascinating. So thank you for your time.
I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased.
thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, it's Daria. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Spotify and drop a rating or a review. It'll help others find the show. And if you know someone who'd benefit from this conversation, please share it with them. We'd also love to hear from you, so DM us on Instagram at Investors in the Wild with feedback, questions, or topic ideas. And if you're an investor with insights to share, hit us up on Instagram or email us at investorsinthewild@gmail.com. After all, we're all mates helping each other.